Hello, hello, Heather Jean here with another episode of Confidence with Coffee. I'm recording this in the evening, so I am having water with a little bit of peach squash instead of the usual coffee. So this is now Confidence with Squash. But I am so pleased to be sharing a little bit more about our Managing Your Inner Critic. So for those of you who are new here, Confidence with Coffee is a short segment which is a kind of an extension or a little bit extra on the podcast episode. And this week's podcast episode is Managing Your Inner Critic. So go and check that out. On just checking my background here, we just did Confidence on Camera last week, and I'm already not paying attention to the background. But you know, we're perfectly imperfect here, and we're all doing our best. So, in this segment, often when I have a guest, I try very much to share what they're talking about and really give maximum airtime to the guest. And when I record on my own, I always find there's things I didn't say and things I wanted to add. So, first things first, if you haven't heard the podcast, go check it out anywhere you get your podcast. Search Confidence Through Cabaret, and please like and subscribe wherever you're getting that. If you are right here on our YouTube channel, which is very likely because you're watching Confidence with Coffee, then if you jump on over to the Vodcast playlist after this, then you'll be able to find this week's latest episode, which is Managing Your Inner Critic. So we all have voices in our head. We all have voices in our head that tell us things that might not be helpful or supportive. We also have voices of intuition, which tends to whisper or be outdone by our inner critic, or sometimes we refer to it as an imposter voice if we have actually got imposter syndrome. And so there's a full discussion about managing your inner critic on the vodcast or podcast. So I just wanted to play a little bit of a clip just to get us talking about managing your inner critic. So have a look at this. It's also about connecting with our mindset. And that's where this inner critic voice comes in. And we're going to talk a lot about the voices in our heads. So, that mind-body connection, and I say this very often, what we experience in our mind, so it starts with a thought and we give it emotion and it gets momentum, and that creates a physiological response, shallower breathing, increased heart rate, pupil dilation, all kinds of things. Some of them you'll be less aware of than others, but it creates as if that is happening, as if it's real. And so what tends to happen is that then gets a cycle going with our thoughts, and then we start to really engage in those thoughts more, and vice versa. So when we're talking about our inner critic, if we're having these thoughts, we're attaching emotions to it, maybe we're affirming the beliefs, if it's something that you've, kind of lived with for a length of time in your life, then your body will go through the physiological experience. And so when I work with clients, and I do work one-to-one as well as in group programs, most often helping women to build unshakable confidence, to love the body that they're in, even if they want to make changes to it. The place to start is from a place of strength and a place of, accepting where you are at the moment. It's a bit like reading a map, right? You have to know where you are and where you're going, and then we look for the options to get there. So when I'm working with clients, then very often we'll start with our mindset and we'll start with our beliefs and what we're affirming to ourselves. But sometimes it's necessary to start with the physiological responses and how we're relating to those thoughts and what that's doing for our body. And that's what that clip is talking about there, where our body will get into a physiological state, which could be fear or any emotion related to fear, or it could in fact be joy or love. And then that's a happy emotion. So it's very tied and it's very linked. And there's at least 10, there's more than 10 strategies for helping you manage your inner critic, depending on what's relevant for you. But in this segment, I wanted to talk a little bit more about those thoughts and what we're affirming to ourselves and what we recognize as our fears, or perhaps at times things that stop us from doing what we want to do, or procrastinating even from doing what we need to be doing. So when you have a thought, I talk about this on the episode about, checking, is it true? Is it a belief that supports me? Is it a belief that I want to maintain, or should I be affirming other beliefs? So when you want to stop something, or you want to change, let's say, a habit, the best way to do it is not just to stop. Like, if that worked consistently, then diets would work. We would stop eating junk food, or we would stop, doing the things that aren't helping our weight, if that was what your goal was. When you want to create a new habit, it then is an ending and then a beginning. And so what we try and do is merge those together and say, I'm replacing this with this. And so the same would be true with beliefs and what we're affirming to ourselves, which is what forms our beliefs. So instead of thinking, oh, every time I have this situation, I'm not able to do this, and your inner critic is criticizing or telling you things that are not helpful, what we want to do is change that voice to affirm different things. And the more we affirm it, the more likely it is to become beliefs that support us. So choosing our beliefs is an option that we have. It's not something that we often recognize or realize. It's certainly not something that we're taught when we're younger, to change our beliefs at will for ourselves and what supports us. I've also suggested that you think about the beliefs and the affirmations that your inner critic is giving you, that you might be very used to, or in the habit of believing. Then you want to check, is this something that I would want to teach a loved one? Is it something that I would want my loved one to behave like or to believe in? And if no, then there's some work to do. And we talk about, changing the behaviors versus, going deeper and doing some of those works on the full episode. But in here, I wanted to talk a little bit more about something I didn't mention on the episode, which is about when you have a belief. Let's say, for example, you have a belief like, no one ever buys from me. Maybe you have an online business. I'm never going to get beyond. If you're trying to increase or grow your work life, on stage, some of the stage fright things, and whether that's lives on social media or something like a podcast or YouTube, or whether it's something that's an actual literal stage, you'll have beliefs about that form your stage fright, for example. In your personal life, you might think, I always attract this kind of partner, or I don't attract this kind of partner. And so we make these generalizations. And again, we talk about that on the Vodcast. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about that is really helpful is to not just list the reasons why you can do something, which is a great practice, but also to look at what it is that's causing your beliefs, and then kind of separating out those. What is not true about that? It's not true that I've never sold something. It's not true that my audience never enjoys it. It's not true that I never attract these kind of relationships into my life, because you can look to your family, your friends, your community, where you might have attracted, friendly, supportive, loving relationships, for example. So kind of separating that out and saying the reasons why you can do something is great, but also really looking at what are the falsities and separating that out from the true facts. So when I am going to, let's say, I talk about this on the podcast episode with, some of the aerial pole that I do is, I can't do that. As soon as I do that, then I would say, well, is that really true? And if it isn't, then look at the facts. Is it true that I've never done something like this before? Is it really true? Or is it just an impression? Is it a fear? And what we want to try and do is separate out facts and fears. And then we can start to, really kind of embrace the acknowledgement of that fear. Thank our inner critic for highlighting that for us so that we get a chance to change it. Believe that you can change it or that you can do it, and then really, take courageous action. So that's what we talk about in imposter syndrome as the ABCs. Acknowledging, thank you for that, whatever your internal critic is being named. There's my dog having a snooze on the sofa. So whatever you acknowledge it. Thank you very much, Donald, for that inner critic warning. I believe that I can change it, or I believe that it is worth trying, or I believe find a belief that is true. That's why we separate out the facts from the true, or the true facts from the falsities, and then take courageous action. So what can I do? Now, one of the principles that I have lived by for a very long time now is what is very well articulated in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's not the only place, and it's certainly not the origin of it, but it's talking about our circle of influence and our circle of concern. And you'll often hear me talk about control the controllables. And so when you want to manage your inner critic, you can list down all of the things that concern you, and we very often kind of draw a circle on a piece of paper and write down all of those things in that circle that concern us. That's our circle of concern, or some people call it a sphere of concern. And then look at how much influence you have over each of those and all of those. So sometimes it feels like we have this really big circle of concern, and then we have this relatively small or kind of almost pea-size circle of influence. That's how much we influence our concerns. And when it feels like our concerns are, attacking our influence, they're all coming in and they're all stopping us, and this just feels insurmountable. That's when you want to take back control. That's when you want to step into proactivity. And in order to step into proactivity, what you want to do is look at what I can do, what is possible. And when you link that with some of the strategies that we talk about in the Vodcast or podcast episode around, kind of managing small chunks, taking small steps, it's really kind of just about taking that small amount of concern, of influence, I should say, and then just trying to grow it. Well, what I can do is find out a little bit more about that. Well, what I can do is talk to others who've experienced it. What I can do is have a plan B or a plan C. What I can do is, and you see, when we do that, we are more proactive. And what that does is that puts a very different spin on this situation. It puts a very different light than what our inner critic that's going, oh, you'll never be able to do that, and this is going to be very difficult, and oh, I hate doing these things. That's when we start to shrink our influence. We want to push back on that and take it slowly, acknowledge those concerns, believe that we can do it, and then take courageous action towards having greater influence. Now, there will always be some things that you can't control. You can't control the weather, but what you can do, see what you do there, what you can do is look for, plan B in case the weather isn't what you're hoping for. There are some things in the world that you have little or no control over, but what you can do is, sign petitions, get involved, be informed, contribute in any way that you can, and we're just pushing that influence out a little bit more so that our ratio of concern and influence is more balanced as it can be. Now, what happens is anything outside of your expanded influence is stuff that you need to let go of. So that's where the controllables come in. We let go of the things that we can't control. So if it's weather, we can, get a marquee, or we can change a venue, have a plan B. But what we can't do is actually control whether the weather becomes a blizzard. They're having blizzards in parts of Canada right now, which is just not the parts I'm from, but it's just mind blowing to me that they're having horrendous blizzards. So they can't control that. But what they can do is, and then they have to let the rest of that go. So there will be some things outside of their control. So when we're doing that, we're talking to ourselves in a very different way, because we're talking to ourselves about what's possible. And I mentioned this in this week's episode. You can't have that negative, inner critic or imposter voice talking, and be listening to your intuition, and be listening to, your possibilities. You need to focus your thinking, and that's where you'll start to get more positive influence over your inner critic, or in fact your imposter voice, if you do suffer from extended critic to into imposter syndrome. So go and check out this week's podcast episode. Go and see the various strategies. See what works for you. Note those down and start working with those. Particularly notice the strategies that you can do immediately in any given moment. Have them just right there in your pocket, and the ones that will require some more work. And if you do need help working through those, I'm always here. You can reach out to me on Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials. I'm also Heather Jean on Facebook and Instagram, so you can reach out to me there as well. I spend most of my time on Facebook, so that's the key place for me getting messages. You can also message down here in Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel at the same time as what you're liking and subscribing. You can comment there, and I will absolutely respond, and we can have a greater discussion about your specific circumstances. I love having you here. I fully appreciate it. We love having you as part of Confidence Through Cabaret. Jump into the Facebook community, which is Confidence Through Cabaret, of course, because we are Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials, except for Twitter. We are at YBYWYS. And on Clubhouse, I am at Heather YBYWYS. And we have a Confidence and Attitudes is our club on Clubhouse as well. So we hope to see you there. Connect with us. Say hello. Appreciate you being here. Tune in next week for the next edition of Confidence with Coffee, and in fact our Confidence Through Cabaret, all things confidence podcast. Thanks for being here. I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.